segment. Hey, man, we got Chuck Smith on the line. I gotta tell you, hey, he's a drama king for sure. He's hard to rope in sometimes, but you know what? We're kind of persistent. We eventually get to that goal. We've been trying to do these Skype connections, phone calls, and this and that, and sometimes that just doesn't work, and Republic Broadcasting does an excellent job of fighting the battle for Dave and myself, so we don't have to do that. And let's just get right into it. Hey, Chuck, are you there?
Good morning. Good to talk to you again, Steve.
Good morning, Chuck.
Morning, Doc. How you doing?
Oh, hanging in there. Good to have you on.
And we're gonna rock and roll on the Bundy situation, aren't we?
Oh, heck yeah. But, you know, we have a focus for the reason for we're talking about the Bundys. And I know some of you guys know an awful lot about Bundy 1 and Bundy 2, and that's what we call them here. But we have some inside information to the Bundys that we saw that existed during our time, you know, over at We Resistors Radio. Chuck Smith was running a network of folks and individuals. And, well, his network was very instrumental in the early stages and all throughout the Bundy Ranch, communicating, focusing food and resources, getting people together, and that's kind of what I wanted to come on and tell that story. I wanted to learn about the good stuff of Bundy 1, the bad stuff of Bundy 1, and go on to Bundy 2, and we'll talk about that, because Chuck has a story that, you know, that needs to be heard, and we also need to take all this stuff into our minds and figure out what we're going to do when this happens in Texas and like the Red Rivers thing. So, with that said, 1-800-313-9443 is the call-in number. We will take your calls, but I will be keeping this train on track. This is all about Texas. This is all about the Bundys. Let's get going. Hey, Chuck, I want you to reach back. Tell me, Bundy 1, how did that pan out for you? How did you hear about that? What were your first reactions? Tell me about the early times.
Well, when Eamon Bundy, you know, it all started when Eamon Bundy decided he was going to stand up against the BLM, and he went out and started communicating with independent groups saying, hey, we're going to have another Waco here. You know, we're not going to allow them to take our cattle, come on our property, you know, and we're going to stand. Well, you know, the pressure has been building up for some time against our government generally, and in those states against the BLM in particular. So when he made that call out, it really resonated. I mean, it was like slamming a hammer against a bell. And so it went organic very quickly, spread all across the internet. And just mentioning the word Waco was enough to really energize the American liberty movement. So everybody started. Go ahead.
Expand this. What groups did he reach out to? Who did he put a shout out for help?
You know, I don't know originally. It went so fast and spread so wide that it was organic. It was absolutely organic. I don't know if it was OMA, which became OMD later on.
What's OMD? What's OMA, OMD? People don't know.
Okay, they had Operation Mutual Assistance. Was a small group of guys who were working with or in contact with militias across the United States. Their idea was that if something came up, they could do a coordinated call out and holler for help. And it was a good idea, still is a good idea. We'll get into them a little bit later on why that has not quite worked out so well. Okay. But the original call was absolutely organic. And everybody answered that call. We had people from Texas. Friends of mine here in Texas went there. And it was a success as far as the end result visuals that people remember. You know, the standoff and all that. We did have a propaganda win, if you will, or I hate to use that word, but it's not a bad word. I mean, let's face it, we're in a propaganda war, and we won that on that front. The problem with Go ahead.
I hear you. They lost the narrative, right? You know, all of a sudden they were the big bad bullies killing cows and, you know, taking somebody's, you know, rights to use his land that he'd had for generations away from him, just saying, well, we decided you needed to pay some money and whatever. So what we had was, okay, Eamon, it wasn't Cliven that started this whole thing, because everything was revolving around Cliven. From what I remember, I didn't even hear the word Eamon, and I'm not as focused on the whole thing, Bundy 1, as you were. But Eamon kind of, well, he got the train on the tracks, I guess.
Right. He would be the one that I would say, you know, in the beginning, I don't think he envisioned really what was going to happen, you know, down line. But Eamon was, you know, the son who actually put out the call, so to speak, for help. And we responded. Everybody, all the internet, all of the, and it was another good thing about it. It got a lot of people to looking at the internet for their news rather than mainstream media. People would hear about it and they wouldn't see it on mainstream media, so they went to the internet, and it really got a lot of people looking at the, you know, at the independent media. So all in all, go ahead.
At that time, you were reaching out to just about everybody using social media and your radio platform to bring news. You also reached out to, what was her name? Barbie Rogers, with that, that was the first time I ever saw a conference call be used to communicate and use as a tool for, well, supply lines and such. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how you got involved with Barbie Rogers and that, a conference call line that she runs?
Well, it was actually started by another guy. I don't even remember his name now. And he decided he'd start this conference call for people to be able to call in and get information. And Barbie somehow got to working with him, and she was doing 24/7. I mean, she was just there all the time. No help, no nothing. It was just Barbie. And ended up with Barbie having to get her own conference line started because this guy would not give her enough control to even have a chime to say whenever somebody called in. He was so afraid somebody was going to steal his idea. I talked to Barbie and said, you need to start your own. If this guy's not going to give you the tools to do the job. So she has now the Patriots Information Hotline, she calls it. And a little hot off the trigger, in my opinion. Barbie's got a good heart. But a lot of times, unvetted information is broadcast that way. It's a good source for people to go and hear what might be actually going on. It's still there whenever something comes up.
And I think it was useful or instrumental in Bundy 2. I remember reading something about it. I never did get onto that line at that time, but we'll get there when we get to Bundy 2. Well, we're still in Bundy 1. What we have right now is, well, Eamon Bundy went ahead and did a call out, and people started responding, and the internet started responding. We Resistors Radio started responding. SMITHFIX started getting involved, and everything's, escalating. And so the first boots on the ground, what did that look like? Who showed up and why?
Well, initially, it was, of course, the same people that were involved in the Bundy debacle 2, as I call it. We had Blaine Cooper, Ryan Payne, these, and Buddha Bear, whoever the hell he was, were kind of the first ones there. And as such, decided that they would be, quote, in charge. And this is what caused so much problem between the various militias and oath keepers and all. And so there was a lot of confusion as to who was... They
actually got on... These individuals showed up first, and then kind of like, well... Because I remember watching the whole thing, and they, you had Cliven Bundy, and you had a few people that was with him, and I believe that Buddha Bear guy that you're talking about, isn't that the same guy as Ryan Payne? Isn't that one of his pseudonyms?
No.
No. Okay.
His name, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember what Buddha's real name is.
It doesn't really matter what his real name is. Just don't trust anybody with a pseudonym. You know, if you can't use your name, folks, then, man, you're losing half the battle right there. You have no credibility. Well, or limited credibility, because if you're hiding behind a moniker, I don't know about you. So we had the Bundys. They were sitting there. They had a few people, and then they had the Oath Keepers, showed up. And then a whole bunch of other individuals showed up. And then we had a camp of, it was almost like a circus act, wasn't it, Chuck? The way that it was playing out?
Yeah. We had the group around the Bundys themselves, and they were supposed to be his personal protection people. Then as the militias began coming in, there was absolutely no real coordination. And so they had infighting, they had competing videos, as it progressed, and the Fed threat grew. They had so much confusion, so much infighting for, quote, control, rather than working together. These are the things that people really didn't see or don't remember, was the incredible amount of egos bumping up against each other, and potentially, men are carrying guns out here. And when you have people who are vying for control in the middle of a situation where you have people carrying guns, number one, it's going to make you very ineffective as a fighting force. And number two, really ramps up the dangers of a gun incident. When you don't have control, when you have men with guns on the ground, that has to be well organized. That has to be controlled. People have to know their role. And I remember you were recently on another radio network talking, and I forget the name of the network, but you were talking, I believe one of the callers called in, and he was talking about how his time at Bundy 1, he was sitting there on guard duty, and the guards or the watchers, if for lack of a better term, would fall asleep at their posts. Nobody was accountable for anything. There was no accountability. And he felt a overwhelming sense of, oh my God, what's going to happen if they decide to come in? What do we do? Just run? Right? Is there going to be a firefight? Because everybody, I don't know. It was kind of like there was no security in the camp is what he was giving me, right? The security would be by having an effective perimeter watch and a communications channel. I know that at Bundy 1, one of the local, a hammy showed up and he provided some form of communication there. And I don't know if that was related to Oath Keepers. Do you remember that at all? Well, let's back up to that gentleman that you're referring to. Come to find out, he's one of the people who came in with a few people, under his command, if you will, who calls himself a militia commander with no gravitas, no training, this guy, amazing that he can have the cheek to call himself a commander. And in that same conversation, he was saying they had no control, but then he turns around and says, we came down there and nobody's going to tell us what to do. Excuse me? You're going to come in here and you're going to go anywhere as a small gaggle of pseudo militia, and then not put yourself under command when you get there if there's a structure? That's a recipe for chaos.
Yeah,
but that's the 3%er mentality, by the way. We'll go where we want to with our guns and throw them around and show woo, and we're going to look big on Facebook. That's pretty much what I consider the 3%ers. I'm sorry if that insults people who are listening who consider themselves 3%ers. Need to take a look at the people who are destroying the 3%er name by being individuals to the point that they're dangerous. In my opinion.
Well, lead, follow, get out of the way. That guy seems to wanted to lead, not follow, or get out. He didn't want to get out of the way either. So I guess he became part of the problem, and then claimed there was a problem, but he was the problem, couldn't see the problem. Yeah, crazy. So there you go. So you framed it out pretty nice. You had the Oath Keepers, who is well regulated, and very purposeful in their dealing with that. I got in trouble last week. It really wasn't trouble, Chuck, but I got an email saying I was too kind to the Oath Keepers, right? And I was talking to their accolades, right? And I love a lot about the Oath Keepers. There's some things that really get me raw, right? It's kind of like, well, it's a selective, closed group. And, you did tell me last week that the Oath Keepers themselves did a good job. Well, in what they were trying to do is just tap people on the shoulder and say, hey, you, fireman, cop, military, you swore an oath to this country, follow it. So they did a good job in that. But what's going on with that organization? Did they do a good job over at the Bundy Ranch? Well,
They really tried. Whenever Oath Keepers came in, this was the first time they'd done more. They'd gone beyond their original, what the organization was set up for. Oath Keepers was originally set up as strictly an informational and educational organization to talk to military, active duty, retired, police, firemen, anyone who had sworn the oath, and remind them of their oath, in that they were very successful and grew very, very quickly. And it was again, one of those things that goes organic because it was a good idea. The Bundy Ranch was the first time they had done anything on the ground, where they'd actually reacted as an organization, and they went beyond the scope of what they were designed for. So while I won't say that they came in force that we would hopefully see in the future, possibly, they did come in with communications gear, medical personnel. They talked before they jumped. They got their teams together, and when they went there, they were ready to come in and do things right. And they ran right up against the unorganized militia.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about the unorganized militia, the Oath Keepers, Bundy 1 and Bundy 2. You're listening to the Republic of Texas Radio. We'll be right back, folks.
Come to Finca Baiano, a small community in Panama, which is being established for people who believe that a future crisis may be difficult to survive in North America after a collapse of the system. Go to bugoutpanama.com for more information. There is limited space for 100 people only. Go to bugoutpanama.com to immigrate as long as you can. Prepare. Don't despair at bugoutpanama.com.
With autumn in the air, it's time to think about getting ready for winter. And it's time to save at herbalhealer.com. You'll find amazing seasonal savings to prepare you for the fight against cold and flu season. Like Oregacillin to promote lung health. 30 capsules, regularly $34.95, now only $25. HHA Olive Leaf, the natural antiviral, normally $16.95, now 60 capsules are just $12. HHA Elderberry Power, a great flu and virus fighter, regularly $16.95, 60 capsules, now $10. Save on all our homeopathic detoxes. Choose from lungs, kidney, liver, brain, libido, or whole body, normally $26.95, now just $20. Visit herbalhealer.com and click on the Fall Winter Specials button to save on all our natural cold and flu fighting products. Also explore our Herbal Healer Academy correspondence courses that teach you how to handle your health naturally. herbalhealer.com, healing the world with nature, one person at a time, since 1988.
Hi, my name is David Merlin from takefromcaesar.us. Income is defined in the tax code. All property is a cost, including labor, according to statute. You're deprived of the provisions of Section 83 whenever you pay an income tax on your compensation. According to Section 83, only the excess over the amount paid is gross income. The government can't so much as provide an interpretation of Section 83 of its own. Get your paradigm shift and understanding today at takefromcaesar.us.
Hello, my name is Don Wiskin from HeartDrop.com, the distributors of Extendivite, the #1 heart drop that people have been raving about for years. Every February, for the last 16 years, HeartDrop.com has had a Heart Month sale to help you stay heart healthy. For only $115 plus shipping and handling, you can get a 4-month supply of Extendivite in either liquid or capsule form to help you get started on your path to better health. Now is the time to stock up. Order what you need. Stay heart healthy all year with the #1 heart drop, Extendivite. To order your Extendivite, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822. Or visit our website, heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite. So here we fight all through the night, going at it now.
Well, this is the short segment, folks, Republic of Texas Radio. Hey, you might be asking yourself why we're talking about the Bundy Ranch stuff. We're supposed to be talking about Texas. We're talking about the Bundy Ranch because it shows us something of the past, something about, well, how we're going to deal with the future. It shows us because the federal government will be ever encroaching upon personal freedoms and liberty, and we can learn a lot of lessons from Bundy 1 and Bundy 2. So that's why we're dealing with that. And Chuck Smith has been, walking us through the Bundy Ranch Part 1, that was over at the Bundy Ranch, right? And what we had was the Bundys, Eamon Bundy putting a call out to the Patriot Network saying, hey, help us, Waco coming on right here, come on. Some individuals responded, the Oath Keepers responded, and then a whole bunch of other militias showed up. Now, the Oath Keepers, when they showed up, they were organized, right? They were probably the most organized group that was there, and they provided all sorts of resources. They just expanded their role in life, right? No longer were they sitting there doing the whole, we just want you to remember your oath. Now they were a boots on the ground group. Do you remember how that thing played out and what actually was the turning point in Bundy 1, Chuck? Because I have a point in my head that I think it turned. What would be the turning point of Bundy 1 for you?
Depends on your point of view you're looking at, from the public perception point of view, from the government's point of view of when this is something we really can't do, that we better not fire on these people.
Let me paint you a picture then. At one point of time, there was this big, standoff. And you had federal agents with guns that were pointing snipers up on the freeway, and you had an encampment of a whole bunch of armed people down there praying. And you had a reporter, and I forget what his name was, and he does all sorts of documentary movies and stuff like that. And he was sitting there looking at all these people with, M16s or, AR-15s. I'm sorry. I know they weren't automatic. And they were praying for, God to save them from the gunfight that was coming. And he said, this is crazy. And he walked up towards the feds, and they were gated and guarded, and they had, their little vehicles all over there. And he said, really, guys, is this how it's going to go? I'm unarmed. But he wasn't unarmed. He had a microphone. He had cameraman behind him, and they filmed that entire thing. And he walked up there bravely, and he said, really? You going to shoot at these guys? These are your people. And I don't remember all the words, but I know that was a changing point for me, because it showed, first of all, the power of the camera, the power of the microphone, and it also was the fact that he engaged both sides, and he stepped out and did something. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. And isn't it a shame? I'm going to have to go back and look. Isn't it a shame we don't remember his name? That man's an absolute hero. That was amazing. Yeah. I believe he was kind of an independent flyer for Fox News. And as much as I despise Fox News, and why is this guy not, well promoted now in Fox News? I don't think they liked it what he did. Honest to gosh, I don't think Fox News liked it that he pretty much sided with the militias, I know keepers and all the people out there. When he saw them pray, he realized these guys are not going to back down.
Hey, top of the hour break, folks. We'll be right back. We'll pick that up. Jay in Texas, hang in there. We'll be right with you.
Had a more intimate connection with the spirit world. Learned as a community and equally taught every boy and girl. The tree of life is us, my friends.
This is RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network.
And again, we just jump right in because time is short and we've got lots to talk about. Republic of Texas Radio. Hey, I got Chuck Smith on the line and he's talking me through a lot of history, right? The history of Bundy 1 and Bundy 2. That would be the Bundy Ranch thingy, as well as the Oregon thing at the Hardin Wildlife Preserve and the Hammonds family and all that. We haven't got into Bundy 2 yet. We just barely touched on Bundy 1. Well, we kind of framed it all up and I just recapped it, so I'm not going to do it again. You can go back to the show archives and talk, and if you're just joining us right now. But we were talking about an incredible time at Bundy 1, and we will get more into this towards the end of the show as we really do recap. But it is important that you understand the power of the microphone, the power of you doing radio, speaking up, doing things, because Bundy 1, in my eyes, the whole thing broke when one cameraman walked out between a whole bunch of people with guns and said, "I'm unarmed." Now, I take exception to that because he had a microphone and a camera. And those, my friends, that's power. Hey, so Chuck, before we move on, we got Jay in Texas, and I'm going to bring him on real quick. And he says he's a 3%er. Let's see what he has going on for him. Hey, Jay, are you there?
Hey, I'm here, guys.
Hey, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I just wanted to speak out for the 3%ers. I am an active 3%er member in Texas. I do understand where Chuck's coming from with the individual that showed up in Burns and made a show of action and was demanding that he was a commander. That doesn't speak for all of us that represent the 3%er. We specifically stand with the people. Go ahead, Chuck. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Hey, Chuck, what do you think?
Well, I have some questions. Whenever we say 3%, what does that mean? There's a group here in Texas. They call themselves the 3%ers. It's a Facebook thing.
Yes, sir.
And there's no communications between the different regions. They cut the state up, supposedly, and they're supposed to have leaders and all, but the leaders don't even know who each other are in this organization, if you want to call it an organization. I'll tell you what you have. Okay. When you have men who are alone, maybe 5 or 6 guys at the most in these groups, who are supposedly training and doing their best, what they're not seeing is they don't have a auxiliary. They don't have any depth in the community. So when things go badly for the United States and for Texas, they're going to find themselves, in a stuff hit the fan situation. And when their families are hungry, all you will have created are small bands of armed men who, when their children are hungry, human nature, we know.
I'm going to cut you off I'm going to cut you off real quick, Chuck. Hey, Jay, what are your thoughts? You know, are you having communications issues in the 3%ers of Texas, or what's going on?
No, us here in Texas, we do keep close ties with each other. We are well trained. There are a lot of us that are former military. I myself am a former United States Marine. Chuck, I do agree with you in some aspects. There is some trouble with the 3%er where we're not reaching out to each other like we should. But as of this year, I feel that we'll be better organized. And to let you know, here in Texas, each individual group, there are more members than 5 or 6 armed men. And our agenda is to guard the Constitution of the United States of America and each individual state in the Union. And that's basically where I stand on that. But I'm not dogging what Chuck's saying, because from the outside looking in some aspects, we need to be better communicated with the community. As a 3%er in Houston, Texas, I'm working on that daily. We reach out to the community to let them know our agenda and let them know where we stand with the people. I'm a Texan, so I believe in guarding and supporting our governor that is making a stand against the tyrants that have left Washington and begin oppression.
Okay.
Y'all go ahead.
Well, thanks, Jay. I want to bring this back to the Bundys. I do really kind of appreciate your call. And, you know, Chuck is always available offline to have these conversations more in depth, and we can go into that. You know, I don't know. How can he get a hold of you there, Chuck?
You know, let me give you my cell phone. I do it all the time. My cell phone number is
let me get a pen, Chuck. Let me get a pen. Chuck, you can also find me on Facebook, and feel free to contact me, and I'm willing to answer any questions and get you linked up with the right individuals that we can give you some good information.
Count on it.
Okay, you ready for that phone number?
I'm ready.
My cell phone number is 817-688-0079. Do leave a message, because obviously I do get a few crazies calling me once in a while, as well as a lot of sales calls from Google.
Hey, Jay, thanks for calling, man. I appreciate it. You know, we all got to work together to.
Right. We love your show. We support you. And Chuck, I support your views, and we'll stand with y'all as Texans. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. I look forward to hearing from you, my friend.
No problem. I'll give you a call, Chuck. Bye.
Thank you. That makes coming on air worthwhile, to be able to talk to another in here in Texas.
Definitely. 1-800-313-9443. Do you agree, disagree? We're to keep this show on track. But if you have something to say, 1-800-313-9443. Let's get back to Bundyizing. How about that, Chuck?
Okay, let's wrap up Bundy 1. As a public saw it, overall what people remember was the standoff and the feds standing down. My opinion, yes, we had equal firepower that we could see on the ground, but remember the big blast over the drone. This was one thing that the Oath Keepers took a real black eye in the public's perception, was the call out or the warning about the drone. Well, we have the documentation now, and the man who vetted, the man who exposed that the drone was on the table, an armed drone was on the table for them to use, was vetted by a friend of mine right here in Texas, an Oath Keeper. He got a hold of this guy, vetted him out, made sure he was in a position to have that information. And it was true, and now we have the documentation to prove that there was a drone on the table, if needed, to back the feds. So the guys who are of the opinion that, we had so much firepower that we'd have smoked them, in the short run, yes. But there's no way that you're going to win an out-and-out firefight with the federal government with the power and abilities that they have. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, what won that was the camera and people being there seeing it. We had it in front of the American people, and they couldn't hide what happened. That's what really won it.
I think so too. They lost the narrative. They did not understand the capabilities of, the new media, for the lack of a better term. There you go.
Let me segue this right into where we are today, with Cliven Bundy being arrested for what happened in 2014. Cliven Bundy's now been arrested. Old man Bundy has been arrested for what happened in 2014. They didn't dare do that until now. Now that we have lost the narrative, now that we have had the Bundy jumpers number 2 have handed the narrative back to the federal government and made us look like a bunch of gun-toting morons. Now they believe that they can get away with going back to 2014, and they've already arrested Cliven, and there is credible intel that they are considering beginning to arrest the men who were there. These are the kind of consequences we get when people do call-outs without organization, without thought, and with other agendas than what they're putting out. This is the consequence of this last Bundy debacle. And that's why when I say things like, I want these guys to stay in prison because they're a threat to the Patriot movement, not for the charges that they're charged with. Given my druthers, I'd put them in prison just to shut them up and keep them from doing these rogue operations again.
Okay, we're going to have to get into that, and that's how we start Bundy 2. Tell me how Bundy 2 started, because it didn't start with the time where they just drove up to the wildlife refuge and unpacked and took over the place. It started way before then, right?
Yes. Months ago, there were 2 issues out that way. We had the mine, which the Oath Keepers were involved in, by the way, which pretty much was a success, but rather low-key. You had OMD. OMA was Operation Mutual Assistance. They had internal fights and strife during the Bundy 1, and they split and became OMD. And that's Gary Hunt.
Operation Mutual Defense?
Mutual Defense, yes.
Okay.
And so you have a board. It's really hard to get straight answers from these people. It really is. But I did have a long conversation with Gary Hunt. I feel no longer obligated to keep this conversation private, simply because he will not answer straight questions. Ryan Payne was on the board of OMD. Now, they go and they're looking at this Oregon situation. I was talking to Gary months ago. I sent him a drone that was given to me by K.C. Massey before he was put in prison for safekeeping. And Gary Hunt contacted me to get that drone. So I sent it out to him. And this was all in, if they needed it for an organized something to help the Hammonds. Remember them? Nobody seems to remember. It was all about the Hammonds originally. So I sent the drone out there, and I told him, let us know. How can we be of assistance? I'll holler at all my media types, and we'll help you. Never heard anything. All of a sudden, it pops off out there where they've taken over this refuge. What happened was they voted to stand down and not do anything when the Hammonds publicly said, go away. We don't want anything to do with you radical crazies. So, according to Gary, the way his vernacular, we didn't have an invitation, so we voted to stand down, 4-1. The one who voted for going in anyway was Ryan Payne. So Ryan Payne goes over, and now this wasn't sudden. Eamon Bundy, Ryan Payne, Pete Santilli, these guys they needed a way to juice back up the Patriot money trade. Let's face it, the Bundys did very well from Patriot money over the first Bundy ranch. We became used to that. Pete Santilli has no credibility. This man will flat out lie to get headlines, to get hits on his website. And Blaine Cooper, is just a hanger-on. And Ryan Payne, again, these people just, they survive. They get their money from patriots. So they needed an issue. So they created one. I guess. Yeah, well, they created this issue, this situation. Then they turn around, and Ryan Payne, who was a member of the board, now says to OMD, now we're inviting you in. This is the terminology they like to use. Now we're inviting you in. So here's a board member, goes rogue, starts something, and then tells OMD, now I'm inviting you in. They say, oh, okay, good. And they issue what I say is a call-out. They call it an invitation. Now that it's all gone to crap, they use words like, no, we didn't issue a call-out. We invited people. We're not responsible. We didn't tell anybody to do anything. We can't make anybody do anything. A bunch of provocateurs. We don't need these kind of people having any influence at all. They will not take responsibility for their own actions. Go ahead.
Oh, I get it. Depends on what your definition of is. We're doing a Clinton, huh? Is that it?
Absolutely.
Is that what we're left in? You know, everybody's defining is. And so, okay, let's do that real quick and see if I got it right. OMD, a group that used to be called OMA, Operation Mutual Assistance, turns into OMD, Operation Mutual Defense, right? They vote as a majority not to get involved with the Hammond problem in Oregon because the Hammonds didn't want their help. One member goes rogue, and then all of a sudden they're all into it, and they're all in. So paint the picture going forward. Did I get that right? Did I get it wrong?
Yep. Pretty much. It's just that simple. And don't ever think OMD is any more than just a few guys. I'm not even sure who the rest of the members of the board are. I mean, they're very secretive. But they want to have the authority to call out militias. But they're not going to call it a call-out. They're just going to call it an invitation if it goes to crap on you.
Okay.
Hey,
so we don't need this.
When I was watching all this unfold on the news and hearing things, I never got a feeling that no matter how organized, how good they communicated, no matter what they did, I thought you brought up the best point a few minutes ago. They were going against the feds, and there was a no win no matter what they did. Am I seeing it wrong, or was there a way they could have won?
On Bundy 2, there was no way to. They had no exit strategy. They had no goals. I mean, you don't do these things without having a thought-out plan. What was their exit strategy? They didn't have one. These guys, all they wanted was the notoriety. And whenever we started contacting them saying, how can we help? Independent media, we were all shut out. I have met other broadcasters since this, because I've been out there hammering on these guys, and we were all shut out. Every one of us has the same story. We tried to contact them. What can we do? And it was like, go through Pete, go through Pete, go through Pete. They funneled the money for Pete came from the numbers on his broadcasts and on his website and all that, and the advertising revenue. For the Bundys, it was just, well, start, sending money to the Bundys again. You ask them, where do we send things? And it was all the Bundys. Go to the Bundy website and donate through the Bundys. All of it. People who went there with offering to bring a whole bunch. One guy went to him and said, he physically went in and said, look, I can have 100 motorhomes here. And come in, and people just surround this place, and they were not interested in anything peaceful. Everything was the gun, the gun, the gun. Foolish, stupid. But
that's what I saw. It looked to me like the only two exits were going to be prison or death, and neither one of those was going to be a good thing for anybody.
Well, my opinion from the beginning was, look, just let them sit out there and have their little First Amendment. But then they started running equipment, driving, opening a road up for their convenience. They didn't know that they were destroying Indian burial ground. Nice move, guys. I mean, these guys were just morons. And they drug a lot of people into it who they consider themselves patriots, and we all do. But that doesn't mean you go out and do something stupid kid and then say, you must join me because I'm a bigger patriot than you are if you don't. No, you're just a fool. And you're going to get men killed, and you're going to black our name in the eyes of Mom and Pop America. We must win the hearts and minds of the American people.
And they never did have the narrative, did they? They never had the narrative.
Never did. And they didn't, they could, there was a chance they could have had they not insisted that everything had to funnel through Pete Santilli.
Mm-hmm.
Pete is too busy, you know, he makes stuff up out of whole cloth sometimes if he has to. That's the same problem we had at Bundy 1. We did not have clear means of communications. That's why guys like me had to hunt up boots on the ground for guys from here in Texas that we knew who went there to be able to try and find out what was going on. There was no, we screamed at the Bundys, put a media team together, have constant communication, nothing. Everything had to come from individuals we could find who were there to have interviews with on the phone, turn it into a radio show if we weren't doing one live, if commo wasn't good.
And it was tough. It was very tough. I tried to get a lot of contact with Bundy 2 or the whatever. Hey, Republic of Texas Radio, we'll be right back. We got a short segment coming up, 1-800-313-9443. Republic of Texas Radio, 1-800-313-9443. Hang on the line there, Joe. So we're talking about the Bundys today, and we are talking about Texas, believe it or not, because the things that happened to the Bundy Ranch, you know, back in, man, Chuck, is that 2014? Is that long ago?
Yes. Amazing, isn't it? How time flies.
In Bundy Ranch, 2014. Well, I know there's been all sorts of stuff interspersed in between the Bundyisms, but one thing different that I've seen between Bundy 1 and Bundy 2, the Hammond Ranch or the Wildlife Reserve, you know, debacle, however you want to call it, is the fact that the narrative was set in Bundy 1. They lost the communication war. They lost the hearts and minds, they being the federal government that was, well, killing cows and stealing land, right? And most people just go, oh, you stole land. Oh, yeah, the U.S. government's been stealing land for a long time. You don't have to put up with it. But when we go forward to Bundy 2, we see Eamon Bundy and, you know, his group come forward and take over this wildlife reserve, right, in the name of the Hammonds. The Hammonds don't want anything to do with it. They were doomed from the onset. They had no narrative. They controlled the narrative. They didn't control the narrative. They had their own narrative, and they couldn't get it out. Right. The corporate media, they were out there. They had the narrative, and they used that, and they villainized Cliven Bundy and the whole Bundy Ranch Part 1. They said, oh yeah, remember those criminals, and they're just going to keep going being like criminals. And they didn't have that frame before Eamon and his group of merry men took over that chunk of, that operation, that building, and so forth. It was a doomed thing to begin with. We're talking about disorganized, semi-organized militias going in. Militias, demonized term, I understand. Groups of individuals that are, you know, care an awful lot, but there's no overall strategy on how to do that. Like you'd mentioned, Chuck. You mentioned the fact that there was no exit strategy. There was no exit strategy in Bundy 1 either. All there was a fact that Waco's coming up, folks. You can see it right there. Stop it. That is the exit strategy. Let's get it stopped. When Eamon Bundy went into the Wildlife Reserve and took over that building, what was his intent? To get the Hammonds released? You know, Chuck, you say it's about the money with the Hammonds. I'm sorry, not the Hammonds, with the Bundys. And I could see that, you know, being in the limelight, there's a little bit about that. But I don't know if they're just absolutely insane because, like Doc said, you know, there was two outcomes. They die or go to jail. That's all there was. You know, I have a hard time thinking that somebody wants to get on the gravy train when getting on the gravy train, you have two outcomes and neither one of them is desirable.
These are not wise people. Don't think, you know, just because someone is stupid doesn't, I mean, I'm sorry if people are stupid, myopic in their view. Sun Tzu said to always leave your enemy an escape route. If you don't allow your enemy an escape route, they're going to fight to the last man. They're going to fight. There was no escape route for the federal government here. We were perceived, and in fact, were the aggressor. And the feds could not back out. There was no way that they could, with any kind of face, walk away from this. They could walk away from the Bundys and say, okay, yeah, maybe we were a little heavy-handed. We're going to back off. They couldn't back off of this one. There was no way to back off of this. They had occupied this place and were doing damage. And these,
but Chuck, don't you think that?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Don't you think that as soon as they realized they didn't have the county sheriff in their ballpark, that this was a no-win situation? And like you said, there was no exit for the government. And once you didn't have the county sheriff, you didn't have anything in your favor. There's no chance to win anything at all. No political ulterior motives, nothing. Without the county sheriff, and he came out very clearly and spoke against them. To me, that was the iceberg that hit the Titanic.
Well, the Bundys didn't have the sheriff at the first one on their side either. But the fact of the matter is, we were the aggressor. Using "we" very, very widely here. We were the aggressor, and that's a perception. And I would say that it's actually the fact. But these people, yes, they're people who will do insane things. And these people just did something that was so incredibly stupid as to qualify, in my opinion, as insane. The myopic view of how do we get something juiced up again. We're going to segue into Texas here pretty quick to make sure this does not happen here in Texas.
Yeah, and we've got Joe on the line. Hang in there, 1-800-313-9443. We'll take your calls. Joe, sorry we didn't get you in the short one. We got a long one coming up.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Yep, we're out of time. We're at the top of the bottom of the hour, and you're listening to the Republic of Texas radio show. We're going to finish off Bundy 2. We'll get Chuck's closing thoughts on Bundy 2, and, we're going to ask him, where are we going? What is this all matter? What did we learn? What can we do? But first, let's go to Joe. Hey, Joe, you still on the phone line?
Yes. Hi, good morning. I was out for my long run with the dog this morning, so don't worry, I didn't mind waiting. I was just running on the trails.
Okay.
Welcome, Joe.
Hey, good morning. You know what? I love your guest, Chuck. He is definitely an intellectual voice of this whole thing. And I live in Indiana. I grew up in Chicago, but a lot of us have an interest in what's happening out in the western states. My kids come home from school, and there are issues. But what prompted me to call? Sorry, I'm just a little winded. But what prompted me to call is when Chuck had said hearts and minds. That is the most important thing. With the Bundy one, you had the hearts and minds. You kind of did. And you even had Fox, who I despise too. You kind of had Fox on your side. And this one was totally different. And I was just going to say, Chuck, all the points. That's why I feel like I'm just reiterating. I mean, and even you've mentioned the same things I was going to say. But the important thing to keep in mind, hearts and minds, the left uses this all the time, and they're masters at it. And we have to have, I consider myself an American, and these are all Americans really doing the right thing. But you got to be careful of double agents. My dad was in law enforcement intelligence. He used to talk about this stuff all the time. And there are people that are plants, and there are people that are going to be hotheads. I remember back in 1994, I was in college, and that Linda Thompson, when that assault weapons ban was going to come through, and she tried to organize an armed march on Washington, to protest. And I always thought of her as an agent provocateur, and this is what you always have to have. Chuck, you're onto something. There needs to be some kind of an organization like you are starting. This is the first I've heard of you, by the way. I'm sorry if I didn't know about you before.
or your websites where people need to be vetted. You have to have a core group of people that are intelligent, that know how to deal with things. Absolutely. The Bundy 2 did not have an exit strategy. There was no strategy. You have very intelligent people. In fact, I don't know if you know Sam Bushman. He runs a show in the morning on RBN. And he was friends with Ammon Bundy, and he told Ammon, you're my best friend, but this is wrong. And I felt the first one had justification, and he had a lot of sympathy. The second one, there was something really wrong. And I don't want to take up any more of your time, because, Chuck, I really want to hear what you have to say, and I'm going to try to follow you.
Joe, thanks for your call. I'm going to get Chuck to answer those questions here in a little bit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Hey,
Thanks,
Chuck,
Joe.
we got another caller on the line, but before we even go to him, I want you to finish up with Bundy 2. How do we finish Bundy 2? We all know when we sort of know what happened, right? They occupied, they kept driving outside the range. It ended with gunfire and an unedited video that showed the death of I think he was a really good man. Do you know anything about that? Nah. Did we lose Chuck? Huh.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had my microphone muted. Lavoie was a victim of both sides. He was taken advantage of by the Bundys, Bundy jumpers, if you will, that bunch. His heart was in the right place. His knowledge was in the right place. What he did not realize was the people who had gotten him into this had not thought it through. Again, people are jumping into something without thinking it through. There was no way the feds could back off. They had no choice but to stay on this to the end, especially because they didn't just occupy and do a lot of radio shows from where they were and just be peaceful, and just occupy the place, but they had to start doing stupid stuff. The bulldozer was one of them. And then you had outside influences coming in, the Idaho 3%ers, also going by the name of PPN, came in and said, we're going to make a perimeter, because now that they've started this thing, and they won't let us in to help, we're going to make a perimeter around, and a buffer zone, they called it. And Oath Keepers, mistakenly, big mistake on Oath Keepers' side, in my opinion, was saying, okay, since you guys are there and know what's going on, we'll work with you. And what do we see? Now we have this outside group called PPN, or the Idaho 3%ers, who are all the same guy. Brandon will not call me to discuss what happened out there. He's running from me. They go out and armed go to the FBI compound, right? They go and brace the FBI. Really? Armed? Why? Go there with cameras and dress decently and say, we'd like to talk about what's going on here and keep it peaceful. But all the mainstream media, armed 3%ers and militia, go to the FBI. Great, thanks. That completely destroyed the buffer zone idea. So the whole thing was a complete fiasco. Everyone involved in it and who supported it, after they realized how bad this was, I am going to continue to hold their feet to the fire, because I never want this kind of action, these kind of people to come into Texas and ever try it. And we've got two borders that people are constantly trying to get something started on without enough background information and knowledge about how it must be done if we do anything. And they want to just react, just go do. Well, at least they're doing something. Well, if you want to commit suicide, do it alone. Don't drag don't drag another patriot into it with you. We don't have enough patriots to waste on fools.
Let's go to Chris. Chris in Vegas. What's going on? Chris out of Vegas. Are you still there, man? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no talkie, Chris. Hey, call again sometime. Let's close this up. Chuck, where are we going? Do we cover everything that we need to cover?
If what everybody recognizes that we need to work together. We've all been saying this forever. So many efforts have been made and all failed. Well, because of this last thing, I think we finally have something where we get people talking sense. Okay, how do we come together? During the last invasion on our southern border, where we were working so hard down there we had militias, we had oath keepers, we had a lot of groups down there, going on private property, blocking the invasion, trying to stop the drugs and all that. I wrote an article called "The Greater Texas Militia," and actually it was an email that I wrote and sent to every leader of anything I could find that I considered any kind of legitimate militia, and got no responses. And all it was saying we need to have communications between everybody, an organization where we can all talk. Nobody wants to take over anybody else's, quote, command. If you're working with some guys and you've been doing things, great. We want to work with you. We don't want to take over your thing, but you need to know what we're doing. We need to know what you're doing. Where can people go to play a fire team and work together? So now people are actually beginning to listen and read that article. And we're trying to get the 3%ers, oath keepers, the militia, and we need these militia guys who, if you're a militia leader or trying to form a militia, and look around, if it's just you and your buddies doing this stuff, and you have no support, you don't have an auxiliary, you don't have anybody you can call on to aid you if it's a legitimate need, or a place to run if it gets bad, where are you going to hide if it really gets bad? Who can you count on to have your back, to feed you, to take care of your family while you're out doing we have all these potentialities we can run into. What are you going to do about your family? You're just going to walk off and leave them to the land sharks, and the teeming hordes while you go do whatever? No, you're going to stay and guard your family. So there's the end of your little militia idea. You have to have community. We have to work together. And open. The gentleman mentioned double agents and hotheads. Well, that's very easy. We're not going to be breaking any laws. We're always going to be following the law. We don't need to do anything unlawful. We want invite the police. Invite the feds. Come on in and meet us. We're just like you. And have a good time and maybe have an FTX, but also have a barbecue. And if there's a Fed there, he's going to be looking at this going into the back of his mind going, you know what? These really aren't bad people. And then whenever he goes back to his office, he's talking to the other minions. He says, this stuff that we're getting from the Southern Poverty Law Center, that's not right here in Texas. These are good folks. They're just like they're just like my family. And we shake them from the bottom. Go ahead.
I'm totally with you. I have a lot to say about that. And, well, we're out of time. But we do have Chris allegedly back. And I do want to hear your view, Chris. Can you talkie now?
Well, I think I can now if I can get to the mute button whenever it's the right time. I apologize, Chuck. Didn't mean to insult you by not being there.
Okay.
Not at all. Chuck's obviously a very astute and mostly unbiased observer in my estimation, and I give him great credibility for that and appreciation and thanks for bringing a lot of facts to the table that most people aren't aware of. I, too, am very close to many of these situations as an observer and one that tries to preclude idiocy from reigning supreme, exposing provocateurs, agents, operatives, and government troll employees that are on the ground infiltrated in these organizations, as Brandon Curtis, a.k.a. Hicks, and other pseudo patriots or patriots, as the case may be. And our assessment of these instances is very limited by what generally is provided by the mainstream, posed as mainstream media, and some of the other alternative medias, which are also rife with infestation of government troll provocateurs and misinformation agents. So whenever we make our assessments, they're sometimes limited in all the facts that we get, whether they're accurate or not. But I look forward to communicating with you sometime to do deeper level investigatory assessments, if we possibly can, Chuck, in order to find the actual truth and ferret out the bad actors that have contributed to this. And I do think the Bundys were more victims of their own lack of sophistication. Not that they're not intelligent. They are very wise and learned.
Hey, Chris. real quick,
Yes.
let me put you on the spot. What did we learn from Bundy 1 and Bundy 2, and where do we go and how do we go forward? What are your thoughts? We only have a few minutes, but I'm interested. Tell me.
I'll try. Bundy 1 was a generally fairly disorganized event that came together and coalesced and had some elements of organization, but it was infiltrated from the very first. And they did have some success. The government didn't win the information war because of their antics and scurrilous tactics that the BLM actors or foreign agents perpetrated on live TV and abused people without any right to do so on private land. Bundy 2, I think ultimately the government had the high ground, or at least the appearance of high ground, although their jurisdictional questions are still to be answered as to whether they really had the right to the property in the first place. But they were winning the info war in spite of the militarization and militantization of Byrne until they murdered Lavoy Finnegan on live TV. It was clear to the American people that there was no provocation for them to use deadly force, especially in that instance where the man actually had his hands up, not to be confused with Michael, whatever his name was, and the other incident, Black Lives Matter. All lives matter.
Uh-huh. So where do we go from here? You hit Bundy 1 and Bundy 2. What next? What now? I know where my answer is. I know what Chuck's answer is, sort of. Where do we go, Chris?
Well, I think men like Chuck and yourself and other people that are truly interested in liberty, freedom, and the American lifestyle have to put their collective knowledge together and assimilate their data to ferret out these government provocateur agents and operatives, to ferret them out. If you're going to have any authentic resistance to being the federal tyranny, then it has to be not infiltrated and destroyed from within. And this is a critical part of the data and intel that we must assimilate and share with one another to prevent ourselves from being taken over from within by bad actor representatives of the government's federal program of psyops and infiltration.
Okay. Hey, thanks for the call, Chris. I'm going to give Chuck some time to respond to that and see if he wants to.
Thank you for having Chuck on. You bet.
Thanks, Chris.
What are you thinking there, Chuck?
Well, that's the beauty of what we're trying to do here in Texas. We don't have to worry about being infiltrated. All we have to do is deny the provocateur a platform. All we have to do is, we don't have to vet anybody. The organization that we're planning right now, everyone has a role. You're a felon? Okay, yeah, we've got a role for you. There's a lot of felons who really are patriots. Whatever they did in the past, fine. You're just not going to carry a gun. Got it? If you're a felon, you are not going to carry a gun. But you can carry a camera. You can bring skills to the table. You can be part of outreach. There's a lot of jobs to fill. We need an auxiliary that's anywhere from 5 to 10 times the size of the total number of guns we have in the field.
Hey, let me jump in real quick before you finish your thought. To your point about felons carrying guns, I understand, folks, if you are a felon, that you have a constitutional right to bear arms, and that has been taken away from you, and I'm sorry that the federal government, the corporate United States, does that to you. It's not right. They justify it however they justify it, but, it's a war of hearts and minds again, folks. So if you're going to be detrimental to the cause, and if these so-called, the occupiers, the federal government say, he's a felon, he can't have a gun. The majority of, people out there in society today say, the feds say you can't have a gun, and he has a gun, so he's a felon with a gun. You're hurting things. Chuck made a good point saying you can't help. You can either help or you can hurt. Bundy 2 hurt freedom and independence, right? It might have woke some things up, but it really hurt. It hurt us all. That kind of half-cocked, helping didn't help anybody, and it got a good man killed. Sorry, I had to segue in on that a little bit, Chuck.
I'm glad you did cut me off at that point, because I probably hacked a lot of people off. But what I want you to understand, here in Texas, after your probation and so many years, you can have a gun on your own property. I'm still looking at the real legalities, because I'm just now really doubling back and saying, okay, for me, it's going to be all Texas. Whether you can have a weapon on other people's private property. I believe that to be the fact. However, break.
Republic of Texas Radio. I'm getting the soapbox ready for Chuck Smith. SMITHFIX, they call him. Be right back. I want to say something and just jump in on the music real quick, because, the corporate United States of America does not follow the Constitution, and we all know it. It's a shame. It's a crime. A lot of people are looking to restore the Constitution in America, United States of America, U.S., however you want to call that entity. It's a big task, folks, and you may see some light there, but I'm telling you, it's huge. And if you're in Texas, you need to refocus. You need to think about Texas independence. It is very important. I got Chuck SMITHFIX Smith on the line right now, and he's talking about, we talked about the Bundys and we did all this other stuff. I'm going to go ahead and dust off the soapbox, and I'm going to ask Chuck to stand on it and tell me what's important right now. Chuck, what can we do and how do we do it?
Unity, community. I kind of come up with a little catchphrase that I like to use, which is family, friends, fidelity, and fun. We always have this image to mom and pop America that we're spooky, that that's all they see is the gun and the battle rattle. How about the barbecue? How about we all come together? How about we organize to the point where it's everybody? You are the militia. I am the militia. Everybody's a militia. But if we don't have a cohesive community across Texas so that we can support each other, so that we can work together, so we have fun together once in a while, and get imagery showing mom and pop America, these are those spooky people, and people are having barbecues and get-togethers and trading prepper skills and all that, and maybe a little bit over here where they're doing some gun training. The Appleseed, I'm glad you mentioned that earlier in your show. I've got to look into that and see if I can get them involved as well, so that they have places to use. Where the militia goes to train, Appleseed should be able to go out there and make it community. If people are elderly, they have health problems, they're a felon, there's a role in this for everyone. Everyone. Right. We're Texas, and Texas needs to lead the way and show these people we're not what you saw, taking over a bird sanctuary and destroying things and waving guns around and being aggressive, and that's not us. That's not who we are. We don't have to worry about infiltrators. The guy who comes in and starts talking crazy stuff, he's probably a plant. We don't need that. We just tell him, buddy, you're just not welcome. No, you're not going to get us on a conspiracy charge by sitting there and talking a bunch of trash, and then one guy in that conversation buys a bullet. That's called conspiracy too. We're not going to allow that. You want to talk crazy stuff? Nah. No aggressive actions. Defense all over the place. There's no level of violence that's not called for in a true defensive situation. Offensive action, you better think again. Because
I know you're working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes, Chuck, and we're going to bring you back on at a later date, because I'm really curious about some of the things that we could not talk about today. And I think they need talking about. But once we get them all nailed down, but I guess the one thing I'd like to say is, lead, follow, or get out of the way. Those are very crucial right now. You can be a leader, that's great, but you also need to know how to be a follower, and you might need to get out of the way. I don't know. Only you can look at yourself and do that. But I don't want you to get out of the way. I want you to be involved. That's like a crazy little saying. Hey, dang, music, out of time again, folks. Hey, thanks for listening to the Republic of Texas Radio. We appreciate Chuck SMITHFIX Smith on the line. This is Steve OBrien. Dr. Dave and I wish you a great week. We'll be back with Billy Ford next week. Love you guys. Take care.
Praise the Mother Earth and the Father Sky. Paid attention to each little blessing in this life. Had a more intimate connection with the spirit world. Learned as a community and equally taught every boy and girl. The tree of life is us, my friends.